In this video, I'm going to explore one of many techniques to unlock the body. So before I do, let's quickly review the process or the phenomena by which a body gets locked. Trauma occurs when a force of energy, psychologically or physically, communicates imminent threat to identity. So threat to the body, threat to our social identity, threat to our known reality, and exposes us to a fear that is large enough to produce what we could call a root reaction. So there are a variety of different reactions out there. The room is a bit too hot, the room is a bit too cold. I prefer less sugar. I'd like to go to another room. These are, energy coming in a form that we are comfortable dealing with. And as a result, it doesn't trigger fight, flight, freeze, or please. Rather, it triggers a conscious analysis and response. So we're talking about a deep reptilian instinct for fight, flight, freeze, and please, because in our body, what's happening is linked to survival. Now, in order to greater understand this, we have to understand the phenomena of age regression. When a mother scowls at us and we are 5 months old, this threatens our entire existence. Because if the mother is not warmly disposed to provide milk, to provide shelter, we are dead. If the mother is not disposed to keep holding us, but drops us on a concrete floor, we are dead. And I mention this because when unlocked trauma occurs, and we are stuck in a world of this frozen energy. When something happens that locks us into a fight, flight, freeze, or please mode, it doesn't get unlocked until an attunement occurs at a level and in that area of the body that frees that particular lock. And so if at 1 year old, our body locks and does not unlock, subsequent layers of physiological and mental association touch that lock, reactivate that particular age, and we don't look at the world from the lens of the adult. Rather, we look at the world through the lens of the 1-year-old. And as a result, certain very small things remain large things for an indefinite period of time. So, for example, one of the interesting phenomena that we can see in much of Western culture, and perhaps other cultures as well, is the terror of dating and the terror of rejection. And this is obviously not remotely terrifying to an adult, but it can be life and death to a 1-year-old, to a 5-year-old. Daddy doesn't like me. Mom doesn't like me. The world isn't safe. I'm not a good person. And this ties into the fact that many people when they're young, or I should actually say everyone when they're young, makes the world about them. Every 5-year-old is narcissistic in the sense that if somebody doesn't like me, it's not because they had a bad day, it's not because they had a bad childhood, it's because of me. And the problem with shame or rejection at this level, when you're very young, is that it's not even about behavior. It's not that somebody doesn't like me because I'm screaming or because I smell bad. It's somebody doesn't like me because I'm unlikable. I'm a bad person. It gets globalized. And the younger we are, the more globalized it becomes. And this is why unconditional love is so important in the infantile period. And behavioral, clear differentiation in behavior is so important for, teenagers. That I'm not criticizing you, I'm criticizing this behavior, right? So anyway, when we get locked up in our body, and that does not get resolved, then we have this phenomena where certain key patterns in the world reoccur, and they awaken the frozen state. They awaken the running state. I've got to get out of here. I've got to run. I can't breathe. I can't move. Or the pleasing state. What can I do? What can I do? I'll do anything to please you as long as you don't leave me, or don't hit me, or don't tell me I'm a bad person. What do I have to do, right? So there's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, and it can also be like I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna fight you because you're threatening this and that, and so fight tends to happen when we have the dominant position in power. Flight when we're faced with something that we can get away from. But when we're trapped, when we can't get away, then it pivots on the other axis, which is freeze and hide and hope nobody notices, and I'll just get very small. Or please, what can I do to make you comfortable so that you'll like me, right? And so those are the two different axes in the reptilian brain. So you have the fight and the flight, and you have the freeze and the please. Now, once we're in this state where we have a number of core body locks, where our body is locked into a particular state, locked into a particular state, locked in a particular state, and then there are kind of heuristic triggers in the outer environment where if somebody scowls at me, or if they are very big and loud, or if they touch my body like this without my permission, then I freeze, I do this. We are now in a reaction that we believe we will die if we break the pattern. And that's the lock. So, we may, on the surface, have a tremendous amount of freedom to do a variety of things. But inside, we understand that if we break the pattern, we face a life and death situation. And so we do not break the pattern. And if we try to break the pattern, we are afraid we will die. And as a result, as adults, or at least grown-ups, we can participate in our own destruction, meaning the dismantling of what we want and the relationships, and we can participate in our own destruction because as a 1-year-old, we needed to freeze because we started screaming and Mom shook us and we realized she could kill us. And so freezing becomes, I've got to freeze or I'll die. Maybe she'll throw me on the ground. And it's sound. It's sound logic, but it gets locked in place. There's no release. There's no repair. So it remains there's a trigger. Then somebody touches us without our permission and we freeze. And they take that as, this is fine. They're an adult. They're participating. But we're not an adult. We're 1-year-old and we're frozen. Not only that, we believe that if we break the pattern, we're going to die. And so, and the same is true if we don't, if we attack our partner because they brought up one of our mistakes, because we believe if we don't, we're going to die. But in fact, we're destroying our marriage because our partner is bringing up one of our mistakes to give us a chance to correct it, right? Because who wants to stay married to someone who defends their mistakes, right? It's hard enough dealing with someone who has mistakes, right? That's not fun, particularly if they're important mistakes. But, if somebody just crashed your car or did something else or shouted at you and you're saying, hey, I really don't want this, and then they attack you, it's like, you're not listening. And I don't want to be married to somebody who's attacking or who's running away every time I try and bring up anything, right? And so our reenactment of the survival strategy becomes the thing that destroys our mature life, right? So this is what's behind, like, our survival and coping mechanisms that got us this far will destroy us from going farther. The things that got us here will prevent us from going there. Our best friend is now our worst enemy. And this is a very important phenomena to understand in the cycle of life. Our best friend is now our worst enemy, right? I knew a woman who, when she was young, she was so abused that she pulled out her own hair, and that stopped the abuse. Meaning people stopped abusing her when she screamed and pulled out her own hair at age 7. So what she learned was that hurting her body would keep her safe from abuse. And so when she felt stressed, she would try to hurt herself. And that was supposed to keep her safe. The problem was that nobody was abusing her as a grown-up, and people felt uncomfortable if she would suddenly punch herself in the face or say what a horrible person she was. And she didn't know how to stop. And so it caused damage to the mature relationship. And nobody was trying to hurt her. Right? So what was her greatest strength became her worst enemy. Not only was she hurting herself, but I didn't enjoy being around her while she hurt herself. But she felt very attached to it, like some part of her knew that she couldn't give this up or she would die. And that was true when she was 7 years old. But it wasn't true today, right? And so this is, in essence, I would say, the psychological and practical wreckage of undiagnosed trauma, otherwise known as post-traumatic stress disorder, where the coping mechanism of fight, flight, freeze, and please, locked in place, often pre-verbally. So we don't even remember when it began or why. And it's been glossed over so many times by a psychologically illiterate culture that we just feel crazy. And you can see it at any point in evolution. Your best friend who didn't change, we're always going to be us against the world and this and that and the other. If you want to make an important contribution to the world, you can't stay us against the world forever. So the thing that got us through our teenage years becomes the loyalty that stops us having a bigger contribution, right? The substance, the addictive behavior, the alcohol that got us through our anxiety becomes the unraveling point in our sustained health and well-being, right? That which helps us to survive and cope today becomes what stands in our way from going to the next level. And the thing is, when you're traumatized, you have a fragile identity, a fragile pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, being, which you know can be broken because it's been broken so many times. And so you cling harder than ever to something solid. And the most solid thing you have is your coping strategy. So we cling to it, to what stands in our way. So that's all context. So what I'm going to share with you now is one path through that kind of maze of landmines. And it goes like this, because I'm sharing it with you today because I just did it today, and it worked. It worked today. So here's the technique. Number one, almost all phones have a voice recorder. I love the Samsung Note 25 Ultra because it not only has a 36-hour voice recorder, but it has transcription. So, and you can keep it in one file. You can do very long files, but if you keep it in one file, you can transcribe up to 3 hours at a time. And so if you do a 5-hour recording, you have to split it, and it'll transcribe it in 2 waves. But step 1, get out your voice note. Step 2, hit record. Step 3, focus on something that is focus on an area where you're locked. For example, earlier today, I noticed that I was looking down and to the left. Now, for those familiar with NLP, that may or may not have, different meanings. For me, it's just important to notice I can look down and to the left. I feel like there's this incredibly bright light that's blocking me if I look up and to the right, so I can't look there. I don't want to look up, and to the right and down kind of feels in the shadow. So I'm kind of locked down and to the left. And I'm also locked in my mind, right? So I'm in a frozen state. So what I did walking around the room is with the voice recorder on, I just talked about everything that was uncomfortable that I was afraid of. If I do this, I'm afraid this will happen because it's uncomfortable. If I do that, this will happen. If I do this, this will happen. If I do this, this will happen. And I just talked for about 10 minutes. And I went through what I would call like the forest of little twigs. You know, it's this kind of phenomena of the straw that breaks the camel's back, that there isn't one thing. If I look too long at this person, I'm afraid it's going to be awkward and I'm going to feel small. If I don't look at anyone, I'm afraid people are going to think that I'm rude and I'm going to be isolated. If I put this video out, I'm afraid that I'm going to get some critical feedback. If I never put anything out, I'm afraid I'm going to be trapped in this small box forever, right? And so I just systematically went through each thing that had this cringe factor. It's like, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel this, and I don't want to feel this. And I just went, and there wasn't any particular pattern. I just kept going. And what I noticed, I just looked at each thing that I had a charge around in my entire life. I got to this one relationship. And I began not only looking at discomfort, but talking about what I felt. And I got to this one relationship. It's actually with Gemini, the AI, Google's AI. And I said the words, when I think of Gemini, I feel disgust and contempt. Now, as soon as I said those words, I had my freedom back. So I took inventory of all my feelings around everything. When I said the words that I felt disgust, anger, and contempt at Gemini, why is another matter. It's very easy to feel incredibly frustrated at all of the AI for multiple reasons. I accepted my own feeling. I accepted the physiology of that sensation, and I accepted the feeling. And I said the words that best described those feelings. Freedom. Now, that was such a miraculous unlock. Miracles are just things better than expected that you don't understand. Right, so I don't fully understand it, and it was a surprise, and it was better than expected. So it was such a miraculous response that I wanted to share it here. Because it didn't cost any money. Because you can, there's many times a day when you can just say whatever into a microphone on your phone, and most people have phones. Now, that's what happened, and that's the unlock. It feels amazing. I also then took a hot bath, which takes the frozen energy in my legs and in my sphincter muscle and calms it a little bit. And then I did some yoga again that opened things up. But those were all supplemental. Those were bonuses. The real pivot was taking emotional inventory and saying exactly what I felt about each thing. Now, here's the theory. Here's my hypothesis. And the hypothesis is less important than the reality. Meaning, if you do this, If you make a recording and say, if I'm afraid that if I do this, this will happen. If I do this, I think this will happen, and that'll be really uncomfortable. I'm terrified of doing this because this might happen, and I don't know how to respond to that. And I'm terrified of this because this will happen, and I don't know how to deal with that. There's a couple of things that are going on. The first is that all of these little things, because none of these were a big deal, meaning if you had asked me, are any of these things a big deal? I would say, no, this is ridiculous. I'm disgusted and irritated with Gemini because, there's all this hype about AI and what it can do. And, it's full of shit in so many ways. Could you do this, this, and this? Oh, sure, I'll do it. And that's crap. I think it couldn't manage a microphone. It couldn't manage correct speech. What's it called? Taking speech to text. It couldn't manage. So it couldn't manage transcription. It couldn't manage its own microphone. It couldn't link with the right Google account. It's just the dumbest thing imaginable. So I felt contempt. I felt disgusted. I felt whatever I felt, right? Now, my hypothesis is that some part in me learned that certain feelings are not okay, that they're dangerous, that they can get me killed, socially or otherwise. Number two, when I notice that I'm having those feelings, I think it creates that lock where, oh my gosh, I'm going to be killed for having these thoughts, these feelings, which was true when I was young. Never got resolved. And finally, I think that this happened and I didn't know it. I don't register it as a big deal now, but my body did. And so since having those feelings and noticing them, I've been in a lock expecting danger. However, in doing that inventory, what I'm communicating to myself is I'm not afraid to see it all. And by saying it out loud and nothing happening, and this is something quite beautiful, I would say, with recorders and with technology and even AI. Like if you believe that if you tell anyone this, you're going to die. Now, you can clearly understand this with an incest survivor who was told that they would be killed if they talked. Right? That's one of the sick elements. We don't just abuse children in our culture. We then threaten and terrify the children into not seeking help. So we abuse them, exploiting children for the abuser, and then we sacrifice the sanity and safety of our victim to protect the abuser's right to keep abusing, right? So it's pretty sick, and it's what we do in roughly 2% or 10% of cases to varying degrees with our children. And so, in that dynamic, some part of me had gotten the message that I could not say this and be safe. And so I was locked into a freeze flight physiology. And by speaking it, I broke the spell. I said, aha, I'm not dead. I just said it, and I'm not dead. And the camera, the audio recorder didn't attack me. There's nothing wrong here. I came back into the present. So that's the technique. And I invite you to try it. If it doesn't work, throw it away. If it works, it's another empowering tool of your personal freedom.